Hello everyone, welcome to Mountain Ascent Association's live seminar on ski mountaineering. I'm Darren. I'm glad you're here tonight. We have some great information prepared for you. Let's begin with talking about why would we do this? Why go out in the winter time? It's cold out there, it's dark, it's hard to get around, it's dangerous. Well, this is a place where you can go to see some beauty and experience some solitude that you wouldn't get other times of the year. The wild places in the winter are even more wild, and the challenge is heightened. Your ordinary hikes and climbs now become extreme, and there's a lot of variety of activities you can do in the winter. Let's look at some of the things that you're going to be up against if you decide to head out in wintertime, whether it's ski mountaineering or skiing or anything you're deciding to do. Let's remind ourselves, wintertime, less available daylight. The snow can be deep and unconsolidated. Your loads are going to be heavier because you're carrying more equipment, more clothing. Navigation could be more difficult, although in some cases it's a little easier. We'll talk about that later. There's always the possibility of volatile weather, wind, precip. The approaches are definitely going to be longer and harder. If you're choosing to travel on a glacier, it'll be riskier and more difficult, and route conditions will certainly be more challenging. So with that in mind, we've got to get ready and prepared. There's a saying that there is no bad day, just bad gear. So if you have the right equipment and clothing, you should be able to weather the storm and have a great time. So one of the things that we rely on is the concept of layering, and that is building a cocoon around yourself where the outside protects you from the weather, the inside conserves your warmth and your heat. And it was trapped in your mid layers and base layers and is also able to expel water in the form of moisture. Appropriate materials for wintertime climbing and mountaineering and skiing would be nylon, waterproof soft shell, wool, synthetic fabrics, and polypro. Recommended layers, about 2 to 3 layers, depending on which part of the body we're talking about. Those out near the ends, like gloves and your head, you should have 3+ layers on those. You should have sets to switch out for socks. We'll go through a little bit about headwear and clothing and footwear here. We often do go through this, but it's just probably incumbent upon us if we're going to talk about ski mountaineering to review this. These two items you see pictured here are called the balaclava and the warm hat. So I would bring both of these on a ski mountaineering trip, and you can even wear them together. Other safety and navigation equipment you're going to need to bring are things like map and compass, headlamp, snow shovel, stuff sacks, all of these things that'll help you live life well in the backcountry, whether it's winter or not. And these can be shared among your group. These should be out with you every time you head out into the wintertime environment. Your base layer should be moisture wicking and synthetic blend or wool. Your mid layer or insulating layer should be something that traps and heats dead space air, so it can be synthetic, could be wool, it could be down. Fleece is a good choice. The new version of fleece, which I'd call soft shell, it's stretchy fleece, is a great choice also. And just be aware that down and synthetic, there's a difference there. Down is going to be lightweight, but it will get squished if it becomes wet and won't insulate as well as synthetic. And then your shell layer is pretty important for ski mountaineering because it's snowy and wet out there, and it'll also block winter storms and keep some warmth on your body. As far as lower layers, pants, we're looking for a full zip. Drop seat possibly with a high back and suspenders. We're looking at wool socks, probably at least calf length, maybe liners. Gloves, you'll need to have multiple sets, maybe running the gamut from something that's tactile through gauntlet length, fingered, and then over mitts. Headwear again too, balaclava, and then gaiters are also key. Although some pants you can get away without gaiters. Other equipment you want to bring along for ski mountaineering trips would be avalanche transceiver. You want to bring a shovel and possibly a sled. an avalanche probe, and even an expedition sled or expedition poke. Okay. 4-season tent would be great to have on these adventures. We're looking for something that's probably double wall unless you're interested in saving weight. And we need something that is fairly strong to withstand up to, say, 80-mile-an-hour winds. So it's got to have quite a few poles and guide lines and a ground sheet. A synthetic or down sleeping bag that's rated to around freezing or below. A bivy sack is also an added insulation and emergency piece of equipment for winter. And definitely bring a sleeping pad or even two. Maybe one of them that's closed cell foam in addition to an inflatable. The stove that we want to bring with us out in the winter should be able to beat cold temps, and primarily that would be, again, white gas, and especially if you're going above 10,000 feet or cooking in groups. Because the bottles do not freeze, you can leave them out, and they're all weather. Although for going lightweight and short trips, canister stoves are still okay. Your pack should probably be around 50 liters. If you can get it to 45, that's even better, but it's difficult to fit all your winter gear in something that small. All the way up to 90 liters, I've carried packs that large before of necessity on multi-day winter trips, so just be prepared to move slower and to grunt that weight up the hill. A good pair of sunglasses is just as useful in winter as it is in summer. And now we're getting down to it. Some essential gear you're going to need for this particular type of sport, of course, is skis. So what are you going to get when you're a ski mountaineer? Well, differently from skis you might use in the cross-country skiing arena or maybe inbounds, you're going to want a ski that handles all sorts of snow. So not just powder or hard pack, but crud and anything in between. You also want to have skins. Now I'll talk about more of these in a minute, but they are adhesive, grippy strips of what used to be sealskin many years ago. Look like mohair that you put on the bottoms of your skis that allow them to climb uphill. You're also going to need to have special bindings. And we'll talk about those for certain coming up here. The bindings that allow you to travel uphill and downhill. And there's two particular types in general. One of them is called AT and the other is called TELEMARK. You'll also want to have a pair of crampons, probably steel, probably ice-specific, although that depends. You may want strap-ons, you may want clip-ons, but whatever you have, they need to be compatible with your ski boots. Most ski boots nowadays that are ski mountaineering boots will have a crampon-compatible shelf on the front and the back. You're going to bring ropes out there. Usually these ropes are fairly lightweight, but they should definitely be dry treated. And then your ice axe can be integrated into your ski poles, or it could be a standalone item. And trekking poles or skiing poles, those will be useful too. And often those could be avalanche probes in themselves. So now let's get really down to the most important part of the discussion about what you're going to bring, and that is your footwear. So here's a picture of a typical ski mountaineering boot, and I want to point out a few things to you. Number one, you'll notice, of course, they are plastic and they have an interior that can get pulled out, so they are a double boot, just like a mountaineering boot. Similar to a mountaineering boot, they also have a rubberized lug sole on the bottom. You might notice that's quite different than a boot that you would normally have in skiing. And there's some advantages and some disadvantages to that rubberized bottom. In brief, the advantages are that it provides better grip on rock. The disadvantages is that it also provides better grip on your ski plate on your ski. So it's more difficult to get out of your ski. So the DIN adjustable release doesn't happen as easily, although they have come up with a way to fix that. And that takes me to my next comment, which is at the toe of this boot you'll see a little tiny pin, and maybe Scott, you could help us zero in on that. There's one right here that I want to circle. That's a recent development, and I say recent, I mean the last 10 or 15 years in terms of the history of skiing. And what that shows us is that little cone right there is a place where, I'll show you the binding in a second, where a very ingenious binding can be clipped and where the boot itself can hinge on that pin. Okay, so that's changed everything. So the boots are insulated, they're waterproof, they are bomb-proof, and they are heavy and expensive, but they'll do the job. This is an exciting time to be in both skiing and mountaineering. because the needs of a ski boot and a mountaineering boot are often opposite. We need boots to be stiff for mountaineering in places where they should be flexible in skiing, and vice versa. So they've just now made boots that do both okay, and so it should be exciting to see what happens going forward. I'd like to not have to choose between a ski boot and a mountaineering boot in the future. It'd be awesome if we could have a boot that does both of them really well. So the two, well, right now there are three choices. One of them is the AT boot, which is probably the best choice, and that's what you see pictured here. It's also called randonnée. There is a TELEMARK boot, which I'll show you in a minute, and that one flexes more at the toe and comes from a more traditional classical style of skiing before they invented lift serve skiing. And then there's the mountaineering boots themselves of any variety, but they do not have the Dynafit little silver cones at the front, and the only crampons that'll fit on, the only bindings that'll fit on those are now not being manufactured and are out of date. So that increasingly becomes not a choice for ski mountaineering. Well, let's talk about what this thing is. Oh, there we go. This is a sport that combines the best of two worlds, skiing and mountaineering. How could you not love it? So the downside, let's look at those first, just to be a realist. It does require some training, it requires skills, okay? It's not going to be the same sorts of skiing that you're going to find in resort, because this is wild snow that we're dealing with here. So it's going to do whatever the heck it wants, and you'll have to deal with it in its natural form. Packs can be quite large because it's winter. You may often spend a lot of time skiing trails and not beautiful slopes of powder over your head. There are forests to deal with, very dense forests with lots of downed trees and creeks and ugly rocks and steep cliffs, and many of those places are no good for skis. Personal experience. Crevasses is something that could be good traveled, with skis, because they can bridge the crevasses, but sometimes you can travel too fast on a glacier and actually end up in a crevasse. So that's not good. They're expensive. I think everyone knew that. And they're not a good choice everywhere. So they are not all-terrain. However, the only thing that is all-terrain is LPA, your foot, okay? So if you want to stick to skis, you just have to realize there are some limitations. However, the upsides are very up, and that is, again, two great sports are being combined. It's definitely more fun, especially on the way down. Those of us who like skiing and climbing can do them both. So let's look at AT skiing itself in a little more depth. This can be described as, again, AT or randonnée, and what this is a way for you to release your heel and put on skins so that you can go uphill, as shown here in the first picture, and then lock your heel down and even put on crampons on the uphill if you want to, and then lock your heels down and ski back down the hill like you would at a resort. Normally the style that you're going to be skiing is what's called parallel. So both of your skis will turn at the same time, and you'll use the uphill edging, okay, to make a turn this way, and the uphill edging to make a turn the next way. And both of your skis will be scribing an arc at the same time. And why am I doing this? Because I'll tell you about TELEMARK, which is slightly different, okay, in a minute here. It is performance-centric, which means that the equipment and all of the experience is built on enjoying the skiing and making efficient turns. Not so much on lightweight and not so much on durability, perhaps, okay? It is a powerful and steady way to ski, so if you are skiing with a pack, that's the choice that you'd want to make. I've been a TELEMARK skier for, well, I stopped TELEMARK skiing about 8 years ago, and prior to that I had done it for about 15 years, and I started out as a cross-country skier. So having gone through the entire evolution of cross-country to TELEMARK and now to AT, I can say that AT skiing is probably the best match for mountaineering because of this characteristics, that it's steady in all kinds of snow, and the boots and bindings are more in tune with what I want to do as a climber, and it handles all the conditions best. So the skis that you're going to get for ski mountaineering, Definitely shouldn't be just powder skis. There's a lot of really ugly snow out there that a person can still handle and have fun at, but make sure that there are all condition sorts of skis. But they can be shorter and lighter weight than in-area skis, and often they're designed to be just that. They're more packable when they're short. They are more turnable, nimble when they're short. So those are our ski choices. Then for boots, one great thing about them is that they have a walk mode. So that means that you can release the heel, or release the cuff rather, so that it moves forward from the heel and gives you a greater range of motion. You could use them for digging out your snow cave and cramponing up a slope if it gets too steep. They've got that rubber climbing sole, which we mentioned. They're crampon compatible. And they've got all the same features as ski boots with a little bit more of a price tag. Let's look in detail at the AT skiing binding. I have a picture here of a Dynafit compatible binding. If Scott, you could circle this part right here. You notice those little pins I was talking about. Now this is not the only one, but this is one of the best. This is a little C-clamp that is spring-loaded and pinches these cones into those divots on the toe boot, and that's what allows it to pivot. That's what allows it to the heel to come up. So to be able to use this sort of a binding, you have to buy a boot that's Dynafit compatible, and they still have a DIN adjustable release, so you can decide whether you want to pop out at the first sign of danger or stay locked in till the end. They also have ski brakes, as you can see here, so just like those in the ski area, they'll stop when you come out of them. And they've got a multi-position heel, so this stack behind the heel plate actually rotates to 3 different heights, so that when you're going uphill, your ski is like this and your boot is like this, hinging. It doesn't have to go all the way back down to the ski as you're climbing. It can come down to just to here where your foot is level and then go back up again. So that's really great when you're climbing uphill, as you will be doing a lot in ski mountaineering. Again, with the poles, there'll be avalanche probe would be a good idea to have those inside of your poles, and then you may need to either learn how to self-arrest with a standard pole or get one with an ice axe tip on it. And make sure you've got climbing skins that are shaped to and fit onto your skis. Ski shops and those who sell them can help you get the right fit there. Another type of ski mountaineering you can try is telemark skiing. And this picture demonstrates the major difference between parallel skiing and telemark skiing. Parallel AT type style skiing is going to be more straight down the hill, where your body is facing the fall line and your legs are turning underneath you. Telemark is like this as well, but the turn at the trunk is even more pronounced. Notice how this person in this picture is making a left-hand turn. Their right foot is in a deep bend, and their left foot is even, they're making a right-hand turn. Their left foot is out front, and their right foot is behind them in a deep bend. So it's quite a bit more athletic way of skiing. It's more flowy and graceful. It is more difficult to learn and master, and more difficult to ski deep, difficult snow in. However, the big upside of telemark skiing is that the gear is a little lighter, and it's very touring centric. So you can go over rolling terrain a lot faster, or somewhat faster than you could with AT skiing. The skis themselves are identical to AT. You will probably have more powder type boards and lightweight options available. The boots have a very flexible forefoot, and they actually have a series of bellows between the forefoot and the midfoot to allow you to flex there. And that also is another feature, that they have this duckbill that's popped out front, and that can get in the way sometimes of the front points on your crampons. So that's one downside to telemark skiing boots. Here's what a telemark skiing, this is an example of a telemark skiing binding. It's only really compatible with telemark, or sometimes with NNN BC boots, which is a more robust cross-country type boot. Notice that it's either got a cable or a spring-loaded cable system that clips onto your heel and then hinges at the forefoot. Like AT, it has a heel elevator for climbing. It is definitely better for touring. It has more of your capability of striding and even doing some cross-country techniques is more possible with Telemark skis. So it's a bit more graceful and better for just overall travel. Generally, they're less weight than AT bindings. And again, the same things need to happen with your poles and your climbing skins. Now, you probably think I'll have tricked you, but I do want to mention that snowshoeing is something else that should be addressed if we're going to be talking about ski mountaineering, because it's not just skis. It could also be snowboards, okay, or split boards. And snowshoeing is one of the options that you can use to get out there and climb mountains in the winter too. So let's at least treat this a little bit here. One is the con and the pro. Must still walk downhill, and it's definitely clumsier than boots, although less weight and less expense than skis. It is pretty practical for those places where skis can't be used. Snowshoes are a great idea. They're small and they're light, and they're compatible with all kinds of footwear. You don't need anything fancy for them. Snowshoes usually come in a framework with some sort of decking, although some are one piece built out of plastic. The bindings are fairly simple to strap on. They'll be ratchet types, or sometimes they'll be straps with little holes. The pivot point will pivot right off the ball of your foot, and so all you have to do is just walk with your feet slightly wider. The learning curve is almost flat with snowshoeing. The traction you can get is fairly great. You can put them on your pack, and you can get them anywhere from 21 to 30 inches, and depending on how much you weigh and how deeply you want to sink into the snow, there's a lot of options for those. So now we've talked about the overview of winter. We've talked about the clothes. We've talked about the different types of equipment you can bring and use out there to travel around, whether you're skiing or using some other way of traveling over the snow. But you're mountaineering out there. And so it would be nice to just wrap up with a few things. One that I want to talk about is navigating in winter. This is when trails disappear, and let's think about, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's a good thing because then you're free to travel about anywhere you want, and you leave no trace of your passage, but it's a bad thing because there's no markers to follow. So it's important that you know how to navigate terrain and rely on your own navigation ability rather than trail markers and signposts. A GPS would probably be more appropriate during winter. There's definitely less bushwhacking because it's all buried. Routes can be more direct. And but you know, again, crossing creeks and going over glaciers and things requires a little bit more thought. So take the good with the bad. I want to take you on a small journey through a couple different places you can go to do peak climbing and skiing at the same time. We're going to start up north on Interstate 80. This is a picture of Castle Peak, and we often frequent this area, those of us who are up here north near Tahoe. There's quite a few snow parks in this area too. They're listed on this slide. There are quite a few different peaks accessible from highways here, like Devil's Peak, Cisco Butte, and even Mount Talac in the Tahoe area, which is listed on this slide. When you move over to the start of the Sierra, you'll be at the junction between Nevada and California, and this area receives a lot of snow. There's lots of ski areas there and lots of mountains that don't have ski areas on them you can use to have the fun that you would like. Mount Rose and Tahoe Meadows are two on the Nevada side. There's quite a few huts that line the western side of Tahoe. There's some trailheads in Highway 89. Rubicon Peak is one that can be accessed from the Tahoe area. Brockway Summit is another. Then there's the Desolation Wilderness itself, with places like Pyramid Peak and Agassiz and Talac. Highway 50 is the highway just south of Tahoe. It's got a nice place called Crystal Basin, which is not even all the way up at the pass. There's a road that's plowed by mud, which gives you access to places like Loon Lake, Rob's Hut, and the Van Vleck Bunkhouse, all of which can be rented for backcountry tours or any sort of skiing in the Crystal mountain range. There's a snow park at Echo Summit, and then The Desolation Wilderness, which I've already mentioned, is also accessible from that side. Moving further south, next we'll come to Highway 88. Up this pass, you'll find the Kirkwood ski area and Round Top, which is a very nice place to ski, including Red Mountain Peak and Elephant's Back. Carson Pass itself is a great destination. Then moving further north from there, and then further south, both would be Lassen National Park, which has a lot of snow. They have had the record for snowfall, actually, in the United States, even though the mountain tops out just over 10,000 feet. That's a great place to do some skiing, and particularly ski touring. Mount Shasta itself is one of the best ski mountaineering destinations in North America, and that's not just my opinion. It's definitely awesome. You've got thousands of feet of snow that you can ski almost any time of the year off the Winton in particular, and off the west face. Then in the Stockton area, moving further south from 88, there's Highway 4, Highway 108, and both of those have snow parks. Although they do not go all the way across the pass, so you'll have to access them from one side or the other. In the High Sierra, there's too much to list on a single slide, and this is just kind of an overview tonight. So I would say any area that's within 5 miles of a plowed highway is a destination. If we think about Highway 395 that runs from essentially Reno, for the purposes of our discussion, all the way down to Lone Pine, quite a few hundred miles. Everywhere you go, there's mountains that you're passing to the west, and that's all the eastern face of the Sierra. All of those mountains are accessible on skis or snowshoes during the winter, so that's an incredible resource. And then the next set of mountains behind them, and the next set of mountains behind them. So there's unlimited terrain there. In particular, there are some snow parks, however, on SR 168, which comes out of the Bakersfield area. That's Tamarack, Coyote, Huntington Lake. So if you live down in the South Central Valley, you can access those. There is one snow park in 395, which is at the end of Rock Creek Road, and that's just above Bishop at Tom's Place Turnout. If you go down that road, that's one of the easier ways to get up fairly high into the Sierra and access the mountains like Bear Creek Spire and Mount Dade, etc. Then there's also Mammoth Mountain, the ski area itself, and all of the surrounding terrain around Mammoth Mountain in the town of Mammoth Lakes, which is a ski mountaineer's mecca. And not to be outdone, there's also Yosemite. In the winter, it's an incredible place to go. The peaks aren't quite as high, but as far as touring and even snowshoeing goes, that's an amazing destination. There is a lodge there called Ostrander, which you can access. And although Tioga Pass is closed during the winter, there's skiing and ice climbing on Tioga Pass. And Glacier Point Road actually has a ski area at the end of it, which is Beaver something. Sorry, I didn't remember that one. So here's a little picture for you. These are the snow parks and ski areas in the Tahoe area. This is just to generally show you how many there are between SR 108 and Interstate 80. We list 13 here. So quite a few there, mostly centered around and south of Lake Tahoe. And then Central Sierra snow parks, most of those I just listed on SR 168 out of Fresno, technically not Bakersfield, but Fresno, are all around Huntington Lake. Okay, so quite a few there. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about snow. We just did an avalanche presentation, so I'm not going to go deeply into that again, but I want to talk a little bit about what to know as just a general ski mountaineer, winter traveler out there. Snow is pretty incredible. It's one of the reasons that I like to go out in the winter. And it has different manifestations. It starts off as powder snow, which you know is the fluffy, fun stuff full of big, shiny crystals. One of the other forms that it can take is hoarfrost, which is essentially frozen dew. And that forms on the surface of the powder or whatever surface it lands on. Corn snow is snow that's old and shows up in the spring when it's more consolidated and is ready for awesome skiing. It's got a nice slushy layer on top. Another form of old snow that's not quite as friendly is called fern or neve, and that's snow that's been through maybe a winter or two. And though it hasn't been compacted by a glacier, it's still going to be great climbing snow and not so great for skiing. There's a couple different types of breakable crust, some that can be formed by the sun or the wind or the rain. And those, depending on how much you weigh and how fast you're skiing, can be okay or damning to ski through. Moats is a place behind a big rock where the wind has carved out a trap for you to fall into. It can also be a great place to dig a ski cave, or a snow cave. Verglass is a thin coating of ice on rocks, which is difficult to ski on, and it has no relevance for skiers because if you're skiing something that steep, you should probably have your crampons on anyway. Then cornices, lastly, there's a little image there that talks about cornices. Those are important to know anytime you're heading out, whether you're on skis or on boots. Please avoid cornices. They're a big danger. Travel on the windward side of cornices, avoiding the possible fracture line, and stay away from below them, especially right after a storm. Lastly, the metamorphosis of snow, which is kind of fascinating. In the winter, the snow is deep and loose, and lots of snow is falling, so it doesn't have a chance to really change and connect to its neighbor. You'll see a graphic here that describes the snow as it goes through from freshly fallen to a couple months later, and it loses its spiny points and becomes more and more like a ball. So as that process continues into spring, the snow becomes firmer and more consolidated. In the summer and fall, we've got neve and alpine ice, which is still great skiing conditions if it's the right time of day or the right aspect. And the aspect is, what that word means is which angle, which cardinal direction the slope is facing. So the terrain, the conditions will depend on where that snow is accumulating. In the northern hemisphere, most of the time, north and east slopes are the sorts that hold snow longer and have better skiing conditions. But it does change over time. It can change over the course of a day, week, even hourly, depending on what's going on with the weather. And there's a lot of opportunity out there for us all. So here's a couple useful websites for you. One is Summit Post, which is user-generated trip reports and information on mountains, which I have used very much over the years. It covers now pretty much the entire globe, but is centered in North America. A lot of information about SNO-PARKS can be had at the parks.ca.gov page. There's NOAA with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Institute, which provides weather that you can pinpoint on a topographic map. And then the avalanche centers, Sierra Avalanche Center, Shasta Avalanche Center, and there's even the Eastern Sierra Avalanche Center, which I don't have listed here for some reason. Then Tahoe National Forest, El Dorado National Forest, and your local national forest if it's not one of those, and the American Avalanche Association, avalanche.org. Also wanted to mention a couple useful books for you. These are really important for not only showing you where to go, but how to do it safely. One in particular that I want to point out is my favorite book of all times with this topic, which is the very last listing here, Alan and Mike's really cool backcountry ski book. Why is it really cool? Because it is a cartoon. You will enjoy it. Everybody, thank you for being a part of Mountain Ascent, and I'm glad we could bring this information to you tonight. It was broadcast live for full members. And if you are a full member, you were sent that link and you'll be able to view it afterward. If you're not a full member of the club, please join up anytime. MountainAscent.org is our website. We're looking forward to a great 2018 and hoping to be out with you in the mountains this year. And so with that, have a good night.